August 27, 2025. Donald Trump slapped a 50% tariff on Indian exports to the United States. Not 10%, not 25%, 50%. Within 90 days, Indian exports to America crashed 28.5%. Manufacturing jobs disappeared. The rupee tanked. India's trade surplus with the US cut in half. But here's what nobody's telling you. This wasn't about trade deficits or fair deals. This was punishment, because India refused to stop buying Russian oil. And Trump just made India pay the price. Here's how Trump's tariff war is destroying the US-India partnership, and why your job, your investments, and your future just got a lot more uncertain. Let me break down exactly what happened. August 27, 2025. Trump announces what he calls reciprocal tariffs on India. 25% reciprocal tariff. Trump's response to India's average 52% tariff on US goods, plus 25% penalty tariff. Punishment for India buying Russian oil. Total, 50% tariff on Indian exports to America. What does this hit? Everything India exports to the US. Textiles, gems and jewelry, auto components, pharmaceuticals, steel, machinery. Here's the scale. US-India bilateral trade in 2024 to 25, $132.2 billion. India's trade surplus with the US, $40.82 billion. Within 3 months of the tariff, Indian exports to the US collapsed 28.5%. That's not a slowdown, that's a freefall. Indian textile manufacturers in Gujarat, laying off workers, diamond polishers in Surat, shutting down units, auto component suppliers in Chennai, cancelling expansion plans. India's manufacturing PMI dropped to a 9-month low. The rupee hit record lows against the dollar. Foreign investment started pulling out. And here's the brutal truth. This isn't temporary. This is structural damage to India's export economy. But Trump doesn't care. Because this tariff was never about economics. It was about geopolitics. Here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. The 50% tariff is punishment for one thing: India buying Russian oil. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, India has become Russia's second largest oil customer. Why? Because Russian oil is 30–40% cheaper than Middle Eastern oil. India went from buying almost zero Russian oil before the war to importing 1.7 million barrels per day by 2025. That's 40% of India's total oil imports. Indian refineries buy discounted Russian crude, refine it, and export petroleum products globally, including to the US and Europe. India makes billions in profit margins, but the Biden administration hated this. And Trump, he's even more aggressive.
If you're buying Russian oil, you're funding Putin's war machine. And if you're funding Putin, you're not America's ally.
India's response: we'll buy oil from whoever gives us the best price. Our economy comes first. So Trump hit India where it hurts. The 25% penalty tariff is specifically labeled as punishment for Russian oil purchases. India tried to negotiate, offered to reduce Russian oil imports gradually, proposed joint energy partnerships, suggested alternative trade deals.
Stop buying Russian oil completely, or the tariffs stay.
And here's India's impossible choice. Stop buying cheap Russian oil and watch energy prices explode, or keep buying and lose access to the American market. India chose option 3, negotiate while hoping Trump backs down. It's been 4 months, the tariffs are still in place, and India's economy is bleeding. Let me show you the real damage. This isn't just about trade numbers. This is about jobs, livelihoods, and India's growth story. Sector 1. Textiles. India exports $9 billion in textiles to the US annually. With 50% tariffs, Indian textiles are now more expensive than Chinese, Vietnamese, and Bangladeshi alternatives. Result? US retailers are cancelling orders. Indian textile exports to the US are down 35% since August. 200,000 textile workers have lost jobs. Sector 2. Gems and jewelry. India is the world's largest diamond polishing hub. 90% of the world's diamonds are cut and polished in Surat. The US is India's biggest market for polished diamonds. With 50% tariffs, American jewelers are buying from Belgium and Israel instead. Surat has laid off 50,000 diamond workers since September. Sector 3. Auto components. India exports $2.5 billion in auto parts to the US. Companies like Motherson, Bharat Forge, and Samvardhana Motherson supply to Ford, GM, and Tesla. With 50% tariffs, these parts are no longer cost competitive. US automakers are shifting orders to Mexico and South Korea. Indian auto component exports are down 40%. Sector 4, Pharmaceuticals. India supplies 40% of generic drugs to the US market. While pharma has partial exemptions, the tariff uncertainty has frozen new investments. Foreign pharmaceutical companies that were planning India expansions, they're reconsidering. The message is clear. India is no longer a stable export base for the US market, and it gets worse. The rupee has depreciated 6% against the dollar since the tariffs. That makes imports more expensive, including the oil India desperately needs. Indian inflation is rising. Consumer goods are getting more expensive. The middle class is feeling the squeeze. India's GDP growth forecast for 2025-26 has been revised down from 7.2% to 6.4%. That's $50 billion in lost economic output. And unemployment? Rising for the first time in 18 months. So how is India responding? With a three-pronged strategy. Strategy 1. Negotiate a deal. Right now, as we speak, high-level trade delegations from both countries are locked in intensive negotiations. India's Commerce Minister, Finance Ministry officials, and trade negotiators are meeting with US trade representatives in Washington. These aren't ceremonial photo ops. These are crisis negotiations happening every 48-72 hours since November. The goal? Finalize a tariff reduction deal by December 31, 2025. India's offer on the table: reduce average tariffs on US goods from 52% to 30%. Increase imports of US energy, defense equipment, and agricultural products by $15 billion annually. Commit to reducing Russian oil imports by 20% over 2 years. Trump's counteroffer: India must cut Russian oil imports by 50% immediately. Reduce tariffs on US goods to 15%. Open up Indian agriculture and retail sectors to US companies, including Walmart and Amazon, getting unrestricted access. According to sources close to the negotiations, there's been progress on tariff reductions. Both sides have agreed in principle to a phased approach. But the Russian oil issue, that's the sticking point. India's position: we can reduce Russian oil gradually, but we can't crash our energy security overnight. US position: every dollar you send to Russia funds Ukraine's destruction. This is non-negotiable. The delegations are meeting again December 10th to 12th in New Delhi. That's 10 days from now. This could be the make or break round. Leaked reports suggest India might offer a compromise. Cut Russian oil imports to 25% of total imports, down from 40% by March 2026, in exchange for immediate tariff relief to 20%. Will Trump accept? His trade team is reportedly divided. Some advisors say, take the deal. Others say, hold firm until India completely cuts off Russia. As of December 1, 2025, they're still deadlocked. But the fact that delegations keep meeting, that means both sides want a deal. The question is, who blinks first? Strategy 2. Diversify export markets. While negotiations continue, India isn't sitting idle. The government is aggressively pursuing free trade agreements with the EU, UK, Australia, and Gulf countries. Just last week, India finalized a trade framework with the UAE to increase bilateral trade from $85 billion to $150 billion by 2027. That's India's insurance policy if US talks fail. India's also fast-tracking EU trade negotiations that have been stuck for years. The message to Washington is clear. We have options, we're not desperate. But here's the problem. These markets can't absorb India's export capacity overnight. It takes years to build supply chains, relationships, and market share. The US market represents 18% of India's total exports. You can't replace that in 6 months. Strategy 3. Boost domestic consumption. India is simultaneously pushing domestic consumption to offset export losses. Tax cuts for manufacturers, incentives for local buyers, $50 billion in infrastructure spending announced in November. The government is betting that if they can boost domestic demand by 15%, it cushions the blow from lost US exports. But India's domestic market can't replace $40 billion in US exports, not in the short term. Indian consumers don't have the purchasing power of Americans, yet. So India's real strategy: negotiate hard, show Trump they have alternatives, but ultimately find a compromise before December 31st. The trade delegations know this. That's why they keep meeting despite the deadlock. Both sides understand that failure means economic pain for India and political embarrassment for Trump's Art of the Deal brand. 30 days to make a deal. The delegations have 3 more scheduled meetings, and the whole world is watching to see if the US-India partnership survives Trump's tariff war. If you're Indian American, here's what this means for you. The remittance you send home, it buys less because the rupee is weaker. Your family's business in India, it's struggling because of export losses. Your investments in Indian stocks, they're down because foreign investors are pulling out. Your retirement account with India exposure, it's taking a hit. And if you're in India looking at US jobs, the H-1B visa situation just got more complicated because US-India relations are at their lowest point in 20 years. If you're American, you're paying more for generic drugs, textiles and auto parts because the 50% tariff gets passed to you. And if you're anywhere else in the world, you're watching the US-India partnership, the cornerstone of Indo-Pacific strategy, fall apart over oil and tariffs. This isn't just a trade dispute. This is a fundamental realignment of global power. Trump is forcing India to choose: align completely with America or face economic isolation. 30 days until the negotiation deadline. The question isn't whether India will compromise. It's how much India will have to give up to end this nightmare. And that's the real betrayal. America built India up as a counterweight to China. Now America is tearing India down for refusing to be a puppet. This is the analysis you won't get from mainstream media because they're too busy covering Trump's tweets instead of the actual economic warfare happening right now. If you want to understand how global power moves affect your wallet before it's too late, subscribe and hit notifications. Drop a comment. Do you think India should cave to Trump's demands or hold firm and take the economic hit? I'll see you in the next one.